Hello and welcome to the Poultry Network Podcast. I'm Tom Woolman.
And my name's Tom Willings.
How are you?
Tom? Do you know what? I'm excited. I'm in my new office. I feel like a grown up.
It looks very swish. It almost looks a little bit like you've got some sort of green screen behind you that's going to suddenly start animating.
No, just a sloping roof. I've got one of these desks as well. In fact, I've got two that sort of rise and fall stand-up desks. It's on a timer, so if you see me stand up in a minute, it's because the desk has preordained that it's time for me to levitate, elevate, rehydrate, and any other word ending in ate.
Every 20 minutes or every half an hour.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, today.
What about you? What's new in your world?
What is new in my world? Not a lot, really. I'm starting to feed the sheep in the run up to lambing, so counting down the days for that. Really, about 6 weeks, and they're all looking a little bit sorry for themselves. They've run out of grass, so they're quite happy to be thrown some sheep nuts.
Are you taking about 3 weeks off work then to lamb your 10 ewes?
Hopefully not, because I've synchronised the breeding. So I've got a very intensive weekend after Easter where I'm going to roll up my sleeves, crack out the surgical gloves, and just have a whale of a time.
You synchronized the breeding. I'm tempted to look it up on Google, but I'd be terrified as to what I would find.
That's a whole other podcast. The Sheep Network podcast.
We should stick to chickens and eggs, shouldn't we?
Stick to what we know. Stick to what we're experts at.
So we've got a guest this week.
Yeah,
someone who I've known for a little while now.
Someone actually that I've known even longer, actually. Because I went to university with her way back when.
Really?
Yeah, when actually she was quite quiet. Dare I say it? As a student, she was very quiet and unassuming, and it makes me smile when I look at her now and all the public speaking that she does, and she just stands up in front of hundreds and hundreds of people and just she'll talk about the sector just off the cuff, really, or with a PowerPoint that she's pulled together in the train on the way there. So. Are you going to introduce her? Because we're talking about this person in the third person continually. I think it's time we stopped. Why don't you make the proper introduction? So today we are joined by NFU Chief Poultry Advisor Aimee Mahoney.
And we're delighted to have Aimee join us. I think she's going to celebrate a decade with the NFU, as you're about to hear, which blows my mind. I'm not sure what I'm more surprised by, that you are of the same university vintage, because my word, you look like you've had a tough paper round.
Well, one of us has aged better than the other.
Yeah. or that she's managed to already have 10 years under her belt with the NFU, when it only feels like yesterday that we were together at Noble Foods back in
No, but I think that's what's great. That's what's great about this industry, isn't it? Is that you meet people and you can go on for 10 years, or you can go on even longer, and you reconnect with people in different positions, and that's always been one of the strengths of the sector.
Well, let's welcome her in, and let's hear what Aimee's got to say.
Okay. The Poultry Network podcast is brought to you by Poultry Network, the UK's digital resource for the poultry sector.
Alongside the podcast, we of course have our website and our New Look newsletter, delivering a weekly digest of news, market insight, technical features, and industry analysis straight to your inbox, whatever part of the poultry sector you work in, whether you're a producer, an integrator, egg packer, or a business within the supply chain across the UK.
If you're involved in poultry, it's completely free to read and subscribe. Visit Poultry Network, that's just poultry.network, in your browser and input your email. Once you have, make sure we are added to your contacts or safe sender list to ensure you never miss an episode.
And if you're a business supplying products or services to the sector, why not advertise where your customers already are?
To discuss podcast sponsorship, newsletter placements, or digital campaigns, email jake@dmediagroup.com.
Poultry Network, unrivaled insights into commercial poultry production.
I'm very pleased that this week we are joined by NFU Chief Poultry Advisor, Aimee Mahoney. Hello, Aimee.
Hello. Hi, both.
I have to apologise, Aimee, because you should have been one of the first people that we've had on when we started doing this podcast. And it seems terrible that we've waited until we're on whatever it is, the 34th or 35th episode to get you on.
Right, Tom? Is that right? Have we really waited, or have we been badgering Aimee for about 6 months and not managed to track her down or find a convenient time or date? Because, she's been absolutely permanently on the road, busting a gut on behalf of the entire poultry industry.
Yeah. Well, usually if you want something doing, you ask a busy person, don't you? Which is why Aimee is clearly in the position that she is. So our thoughts, Aimee, were that we know that the NFU conference has just been. There was an awful lot of things that were talked about and discussed there, both within wider farming and within poultry farming. So we thought we'd have a bit of a catch up with you, get a bit of a debrief for people that weren't there as to what was discussed, and get some of the key takeaways really from the sessions. So you've been to a lot of NFU conferences in your time, haven't you? What is this? Is this like your 10th conference?
That's a really good guess, because it's my 10th year at the NFU this year. So
You're kidding.
Yeah, it probably is the 9th or 10th conference.
That ages both of us, Aimee. I'm going to admit now that when I think of Aimee, I think of our mutual previous employer and the whole process of Aimee joining that business, and both of us, I think, were relatively new in poultry at that point, and you've already done a decade in the NFU. Well, cheers to that.
Mm. Well, yeah.
Where did my life go?
It's been a busy 10 years, hasn't it, Aimee?
Yes, it certainly has. And actually, I joined the NFU in 2016, the week after the referendum vote. So it was quite a different place to join to where I was previous, but also sort of when I accepted the job. And then I became the Chief Poultry Advisor July 2020, so the middle of COVID. So some may say I'm a glutton for punishment, but certainly makes for a varied work life.
And it must be quite exciting work in the NFU, because there is always loads of stuff going on, isn't there, across the sectors? And yeah, it must just be quite fun to be part of that bigger machine.
Yeah, absolutely, because obviously I'm very poultry centric, but we cover poultry meat and eggs, and as you both know, it's quite unique. There's few roles that sort of cover both. A lot of roles specialise in one or the other, and I obviously got really good grounding from my first role in the egg sector. But yeah, coming into the policy world was sort of equally scary, equally exciting, but just to feel that you're doing something worthwhile and kind of making sure farmers are being heard at all levels throughout the supply chain and with the government, etc. It's a privilege to do it, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't hard work most of the time.
Do you feel you're winning the battle? Because I think for a long, long time, poultry feels like it's been a bit of a forgotten entity in farming, and I wonder even with NFU whether or not that's the case. But you go to Emma Reynolds' speech at the conference this year, and grant availability for poultry farmers on the list. It slightly feels that maybe we're turning a corner. Is that your influence?
I mean, it might be a bit big-headed, so it was all down to me. But no, I do think collectively, obviously all the organisations, but the NFU and the Poultry Board in particular, we've been very strategic over the last couple of years. So there's always a great list of challenges and opportunities that I think poultry people, they want to do everything, which is great, but we've really had to look at it in terms of having a strategy. What are the priorities? And I don't think it's an accident that we are now being featured a lot more, like you say, in the pathway or in government speeches, wherever it might be. There is a focus, and there's an awareness of the progressiveness and the innovation, etc., in the poultry sector, which quite honestly is just the envy of other sectors that I speak to.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about the Poultry Breakout session. And I think for those that don't know how the conference works, is you have the main conference, don't you, in the big hall where everyone stands around and listens to the really big and important people talking. I think Rishi Sunak came, didn't he, a couple of years ago, and Keir Starmer came as well, didn't he? That's what won in the rural vote. He knows how to pull the wool over people's eyes, doesn't he? But then you also have these little breakout sessions as well, don't you, focusing on specific sectors and specific topics. So there's a poultry session. And what was discussed this year?
Yeah, so the overall theme of the conference was around resilience this year. I guess for obvious reasons, but there's lots of kind of synergies with areas we're working on. And for the poultry session, we kept that resilience theme, but we drilled down into a bit more horizon scanning. So we had a panel discussion. So I chaired the session, and we had 4 panelists who all brought something different from across the poultry, meat and egg sectors. And we discussed resilience in terms of challenges and opportunities that they felt the poultry sector would face going forwards. So sort of a horizon scanning, looking at both the positives and those things that we need to kind of get on top of to allow us to be a resilient sector.
And summarise those sort of key findings. Then, what were the top 1, 2, 3 of those factors?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it won't surprise anyone that planning was a hot topic, because I think it's a barrier that a lot of people see to being able to invest and grow, and it sort of underpins producer confidence. So planning was a key topic. Welfare was also up there. So there was a lot of discussion around the current consultation which the government have on colony cages. There's also mention on the poultry meat side around welfare going forwards, whether that's better chicken commitment or whether it's something else. I mean, the environment is always going to be something that's mentioned at a poultry conference or in a poultry meeting, around the challenges with water quality, but also trying to meet some of these kind of ever-growing expectations, whilst keeping poultry meat and eggs as an affordable and accessible source of protein for consumers to purchase and enjoy to eat.
Yeah, and there's a whole range of different NGOs, aren't there, in different areas, just as you've highlighted, whether it's welfare or whether it's the environment, or whether it's other areas, whether it's social justice, etc., that are all coming at the poultry sector from different angles, potentially, and putting it under pressure in different ways. I suppose, as they have a right to do so. And the NFU is quite often one of the main organisations, isn't it, that is trying to argue the case for current farmers and arguing the case for doing things in a certain way. How do you see that dynamic between the NFU and NGOs evolving, and how has it evolved, I suppose, over the time since you've been with the NFU? Where are we at now? Are we working better with some of these organisations, or are things potentially becoming more fraught than ever?
It's something that's always sort of top of my mind in terms of engagement, because we spend a lot of time engaging with stakeholders across the supply chain, different ministers and MPs and civil servants, etc., within the government. And depending on sort of how you define an NGO, because I think we often use it as a bit of an umbrella term, but it could be anything from a real activist group that is their mission is sort of to set out to disenfranchise the sector, and there's also bodies and organisations like the RSPCA, for instance. I mean, we as the NFU are a lobby organisation, so we're all lobbying, but on different themes and with different remits, I guess. So we do quite a bit of engagement across the piece. I couldn't sit here and say, we actively engage with some of those real hardcore like activist groups, because I don't think we have anything to gain necessarily from doing so. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't, but at this moment in time, it's not something we are actively engaged in. But yeah, we do. I think one thing the NFU has started to do more of is being more proactive in terms of telling the story, which is really important. Because if you have got misinformation, I mean, the world is full of fake news these days, which is quite scary, and scary for younger generations that get most of it on social media and online, where there feels like very little sort of fact checking. We need to be more proactive collectively on telling all the positive things that the poultry sector does have to tell, because if we are just reactive, I fear that we then look defensive, and there's no need to be, because poultry producers aren't doing anything wrong. We just need to be better at sort of being positive, celebrating all the successes, and telling that story to a wider audience.
Because I'd certainly say, based on my limited social media feeds, you see people in different sectors, like sheep, take for example, or pigs, and I see people that are working on farms showing what they're doing and explaining what they're doing and making videos about it. Probably I'd imagine that in poultry we are the least represented sector, agricultural sector, when it comes to social media, because the vast majority of poultry farmers want to keep their heads down. They don't want to necessarily be putting themselves out there and making themselves a target for some of these people that don't agree with what they're doing. So it's quite a big ask, isn't it, for the sector, even though I think probably most people would sit around the table and agree, well, yes, if we don't tell our story, then we're leaving it up to others to tell it for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is difficult. If you looked across the NFU's main social media channels, you will absolutely see more of your livestock, like your beef and sheep, and your crops and your horticulture, etc. But we are moving that dial. We have got producers that are willing. You don't necessarily have to be on camera, but it's about showing the birds, the environment, the care, the steps that producers take to ensure the food is safe, and how it sort of gets to them at the supermarket, which I guess we're so engrossed in the industry that we forget that people don't know a lot about where their food comes from. And so it's telling that story. But there are also different ways of doing it. So one thing, and I've personally been involved in this Farmers for Schools initiative, which is something the NFU education team runs. And now everyone that does our poultry industry program, we train them. So the next generation sort of coming through, they do their Farmers for Schools training. And then basically schools get in touch with the NFU, and you can go and do, I've done assemblies, or I've done sort of smaller like focus groups with students. I've talked about careers as well. So it's not, sometimes it's about the poultry sector, like how do you just look after birds, how do you produce the chicken or the eggs or the turkey or whatever it might be. Sometimes in secondary schools, the students are much more interested in like what careers they can go into. And that could be farming, but it could be nutrition, genetics, engineering. Like we need all of these sort of associate professions as well. So that's something I would champion and encourage people to get involved in, is going into their local school and just sharing their story.
So another thing that came out of the NFU conference that's poultry specific was you had a shed survey, didn't you? A laying hen shed survey, and you've done something similar in the broiler sector, haven't you, last year?
Yeah.
And yeah, tell me what your general results were then with your laying hen survey.
Yeah, so it's the first time we've done the shed age survey in the egg sector. So we have previously done a broiler shed age survey, And we find the data that it generates really useful, particularly in our lobbying, but also like bringing issues to life. So everyone knows we keep banging the drum on breaking down like the barriers for planning permission, but actually if we can put some stats to it, it really helps. And anecdotal information is great, but when you've got sort of like hard facts and figures, it does get the attention of those policymakers that you need. So it's our first ever egg shed age survey, so that's exciting. And the results came out just before conference, so it's kind of hot off the press. We surveyed the whole sector, so it was for laying hen sheds, but also pullet rearing and layer breeders. And I think it's probably not surprising that the average age of your pullet rearing sheds is significantly older.
38 years old. I've got it in front of me. This should terrify people, because you go right back to the cage consultation, which you mentioned a few moments ago, and we should remind people that there is still time. There is still time to get your responses in. If you haven't done it yet, please. We'll put the details in the links to this podcast. But the industry needs your voice now more than ever. But a 38-year-old average age of a pullet rearing shed tells its own story. And if we're about to see in the near future the end of the cage age, then those sheds, those bird places, are going to need to be replaced, or else we're going to wave in imported egg at lesser standards from elsewhere in the world. But as you said, planning is so difficult, and here is the evidence. And the numbers of people that you've had respond to this survey, I found incredible. I don't know how many surveys I've tried to conduct in my working life, never with this degree of success. You've got 16.5 million layers, nearly 1,000 sheds have responded. That's a huge proportion of the overall industry. So I think the stats that have come out as a result of this need to be read, need to be understood, and frankly need to be seen to be believed. They're it's not a good picture.
I'd just like to say, on the point of pullet rearing sheds, I am 38 years old and I am very much still in my prime.
No, you're ready for replacement. And as a older than you,
if you were a chicken shed, you'd be long gone, Tom.
Would, yeah.
I think it's really interesting though, and it talks not only to like when the shed was built, but we collected information on refurbishments. So, but also, if we're going to invest, if colony cages are going, and which is what the government are proposing, and absolutely second, Tom, your call there, we do need everyone to respond to this consultation. It closes Monday the 9th of March. So please put your views in. The government need to hear them. They're hearing them from other people, and they need to hear that balance of view. So please respond to that. But in terms of infrastructure, and you mentioned the pullet rearing average age was 38 years. I think the average age of the laying shed was about 17 years. And we've also got the data to show kind of where there's been peaks and troughs in new sheds being built. So I think around refurbishments actually is about 20% of sheds had undergone major refurbishment. So there has been that uptick too. But the broiler shed age survey, which we did last year, for the first time, we actually collected data on where people were in terms of regions. So we can drill down into the data regionally. So we replicated that in the egg survey. And it was actually Wales, again, probably not surprisingly, because we have seen a lot of new shed building or farmers from other sectors diversifying into poultry, particularly in Wales. So their average shed age was 9 years. And then England actually have the oldest at 19 years. So regionally, sort of within GB, we can also pull out those differences. And it does make a difference because the NFU is England and Wales, but we absolutely work really hard with our counterparts in the other UK farming unions. But we have devolved governments as well. so they can have different policies. One thing that did come out of conference, which might be of interest, is when the Secretary of State addressed the entire conference, and there were 1,200 people there in the auditorium. She announced the new parts to the animal health and welfare pathway, and one of those is around biosecurity visits for poultry producers, and this is England only. So just as top of my mind, because I was actually at the NFU Cymru Poultry Conference yesterday, and that was something I wanted to kind of like say, this is brilliant, because we've been working on this for a long time, trying to make poultry something relevant for poultry within the pathway, because it's sort of traditionally been a little bit outside of it compared to the other sectors. But I didn't shout too loudly at the NFU Cymru Poultry Conference about it, because it doesn't apply to those members in Wales. So we do have differences across the different countries.
Brilliant. Well, I think we'll probably round it up there, Aimee, if that's all right. Thank you for talking to us, and I hope it's not quite so long until we talk to you again, because I'm sure whenever there's some sort of storm in the poultry sector going down, the NFU are quite often in touch with things, so it would be good to catch up with you at various points in the future.
Absolutely. If I can, just before we finish, we're currently in our election period. So our National Poultry Board, who I work really closely with, in fact, they direct sort of all the work streams and projects that we get involved in. They're currently up for election. So you've only got a couple of days left. Sunday, the 8th of March is the deadline for this one. So if you want to apply for the board, then you could do that on Sunday and then put your colony cage consultation response in on Monday, because they're the deadlines. And if you're really keen, there's a national planning policy framework consultation ongoing, and that closes on Tuesday. And there's lots of information on NFU online for people that might want to respond to any of those things. But yeah, we need great people for the board to help set that future direction and continue with all the good work that we're doing. So sorry for the shout out, but we need to attract good people.
Great. Thank you, Aimee.
Thanks very much.
Well, that was great to see Aimee again.
It certainly was. Yeah. She's fantastic.
Going great guns. I know she talked about being very modest around the influence of NFU on poultry and poultry within the NFU, and further afield. But it definitely feels as though the poultry industry is starting to cut through, starting to be heard. We've got a lot of positive messages we need to get across, not least to the consumer, of course, not just the NGOs.
Although, I'm a little bit worried about the planning question, because I think you can see what has happened with regards inheritance tax, and I don't know how much you lay that at the door of the NFU, along with all the other people that were lobbying for it to be changed. But obviously that was changed by the government, so there was a win there. I'm a little bit sceptical in terms of planning. The government has been saying that they want to free up planning right from the start, really. It was one of the big things when they came into government, and I've listened to the old Secretary of State, Steve Reed, say that he wants to help people build poultry sheds, but I don't really know how easy it's going to be to unpick the planning system, which is, at the end of the day, isn't it, is controlled in lots of different areas locally, and can't necessarily be set by central government. But
this is probably a really contentious view, and I ought to be very, very careful about what I say, but it also no longer feels like it's the planning decisions are those that are made simply by the authorities in that position, and NIMBYism and the influences on local communities by lobbyists, by very, very well backed, well funded single focus groups, feels as big a hurdle as any of the the dotting of the I's and crossing of the T's that the more bureaucratic process would have you go through. So yeah, very difficult. A bit of a postcode lottery on one front, and just a very tough swim against a very strong tide on a community level.
But I suppose looking forward as well, something will have to give, won't it? When you look at the
what are we going to eat, Tom? Because the rate we're going, we are forcing out our farmers and our food producers and our growers by ever tightening, ever more restrictive, regulation or condition or changing laws. And to my mind, we don't seem to be taking food security, food resilience seriously. And that in the not even in the long term, in the near future, feels as though we're just one crisis, whatever that form that might take, away from bare shelves again. We've got really short memories.
And there's definitely no crises going on this week, is there?
What could possibly happen?
What could go wrong?
There we are.
Anyway, brilliant. That'll do for this week, won't it?
That will. Good to see you. See you again next week.
Great. All right. Bye-bye.